We were in the passage where the poet speaks of how the mind does not know silence, does not have rest enough, even in dream. And he continues, into the body's many storied rooms, endless crowd down the dream god's messages. The body is compared to an edifice with many storied rooms, many storied to describe many planes of consciousness, many planes of existence, like the thought level, the emotional level, the desire level, the sense level, the physical level, all these. So the messages from the dream god crowd down into any of these rooms, and the mind is very active. Then he describes man's life in general. All is a 100-toned murmur and babble and stir. Always some kind of murmur goes on, and it has 100 tones. Now it has this tune, after a while another tune, and so on. Babble, confused sounds, stir, nothing is silent, nothing is quiet, but all is agitated. There is a tireless running to and fro, a haste of movement and a ceaseless cry, haste of movement of the various impulses and a ceaseless cry, cry of desire. The hurried servant senses answer apace to every knock upon the outer doors. The senses, if the mind is the vice regent, the senses of hearing, smell, touch, sight, all these are servants, and they answer to every knock on the door. If there is some kind of fragrant smell, the sense of smell rushes to welcome that fellow. If it is a sound or a music, then the sense of hearing. So, the senses don't lose a time. They rush to the outer surface. The hurried servant senses answer apace to every knock upon the doors, outer doors, bring in life's visitors, report each call. The senses, it is through the doors of the senses that all the outside visitors of life enter into our existence. And it is the senses that go open the doors, bring in life's visitors, report to the mind, so and so has called, such and such a thought, such and such a sound has come. Admit the 1,000 queries and the calls and the messages of communicating minds, mind to mind. People emit thoughts. Now those thoughts from each mind, they are also grasped by the senses and communicated. And the heavy business of unnumbered lives. It is not one life, but life after life. All these are attended upon by the army of senses, and all the 1,000-fold commerce of the world. It is the mind is in a total confusion. It is always a prisoner of outside visitors, served by all these senses which don't give it 1 minute's rest, reporting every call, reporting every impact from outside. Even in the tracts of sleep is can't repose. Even if one goes to real sleep, not dreams, even there the repose, the rest is very little. He mocks life, steps in strange subconscious dreams. The vice region, the mind. In subconscious dreams, everything is a mockery. Nothing answers to facts. There is caricature. There is exaggeration. He strays in a sublime realm of symbol scenes. In sleep, the mind, the mental being, goes into a sublime realm where everything is seen in symbols, not material figures, but symbols, various kinds of symbolic designs. His night with thin air visions and dim forms, he packs. The mental being packs the night with hazy visions, dim forms, or peoples with slight drifting shapes, and only a moment spent in silent self. The mind does not know how to withdraw into the silent self. It is even in sleep, even in dream, it is always tossed about, and it is only occasionally that it spends a moment in the silent self. Adventuring into infinite mind space, he unfolds his wings of thought in inner air. When the thought activity is on, the mind takes wings, as it were, and goes into the inner realm. He or traveling in imagination's car, or the mind goes on imagining things, crossing continents, crossing the seas and the oceans, crosses the globe, journeys beneath the stars, to subtle worlds take his ethereal course, all in imagination, visits the gods on life's miraculous peaks, communicates with heaven, tampers with hell. Communicates with heaven is all right, but the mind is also mischievous. It meddles with hell, that is the subterranean regions in our own being, which had better been left untouched. This is the little surface of man's life. All this description, with the soul an indifferent master and the mind a seeming king, all this life is the little surface of man's life. He is this, and he is all the universe. This surface activity constitutes his entire life and all that the universe means to him. He scales the unseen, some part of his being, ascends the unseen heights. His depths dare the abyss, the depths of the being, depths of the soul. They challenge the depths below, even the subconscious. Explore them. A whole mysterious world is locked within each one of us, a world by itself. And a mysterious world is there closed behind the doors of the surface being. Unknown to himself lives a hidden king behind rich tapestries in great secret rooms. The inner being, the inner Purusha, you may call the soul, he lives behind. But involved in this life movement, he is not fully aware of his own self. Unknown to himself lives a hidden king. It is better to take this hidden king as the inner being and not this deeper soul, because the deeper soul has full awareness and full consciousness. But here, the inner Purusha, an epicure of the spirit's unseen joys, an enjoyer of the unseen joys of the spirit within, he lives on the sweet honey of solitude. He is not mixed up with all the guests and activities of the surface being. There is a gulf and the inner being stands behind. A nameless God in an unapproachable fane. Fane is a narrow street, and there one can't easily enter. There is that God, nameless God, who is not known to the outside life. He is there in the secret adytum of his inmost soul. Adytum is the sanctum sanctorum, the innermost holy chamber of the temple. And there he is as a nameless God. He guards the being's covered mysteries beneath the threshold, behind shadowy gates, or shut in vast cellars of inconscient sleep. All these mysteries which are hidden behind the shadowy gates of the outer being, or shut in the vast cellars of unconscious or the subconscious sleep, insentience, the immaculate, pure, divine, all-wonderful Creator casts into the argent purity of his soul, the soul of man, the silvery purity of his soul, his splendor and his greatness and the light of self-creation in time's infinity, as into a sublimely mirroring glass. That is to say, the inner being, the soul that is involved in the moment of evolution, is like a mirror. It reflects the glory and the purity of the wonderful God, Creator. His splendor and his greatness and light are cast into this soul, and they reflect as a sublimely mirroring glass. Man in the world's life works out the dreams of God. That being so, it is the glory of God, the truth of God, that is mirrored in the existence of the soul. And the soul is the king of the life of man. So, man's life works out the dreams of God, the intention of God. May not be every day, may not be immediately, But in the long run, every man, every human being works out ultimately what was intended, what was the sealed order given to the soul when it was cast from the infinite being of the creative Godhead. But he says, but all is there. Even God's opposites, even what we think to be the opposites of God and godly qualities, they are all there in seed form. He is a little front of nature's works. Man is only a front. Behind is the activity of nature, a thinking outline of cryptic force. It is the force of nature, condensed, that works through this outline, a thinking outline that is man. All she reveals in him that is in her. Nature reveals in man what is there in herself. Her glories walk in him and her darknesses. Not only the glories of nature, but even the darknesses of nature live and walk in man, with man. Man's house of life holds not the gods alone. In the house of our being, it is not only gods and godly powers that dwell, but even the antagonist powers are there lodged in the being of the human. There are occult shadows, there are tenebrous powers, dark, inhabitants of life's ominous nether rooms, a shadowy world, stupendous denizens. These are the bhutas, the pishachas, the rakshasas, the asuras in Indian mythology. All of them are in some element of themselves in the human system, in the human being. But a careless guardian of his nature's powers, man harbors dangerous forces in his house. Man is not sufficiently aware of who are the guests that live in his house. He says, he is a careless guardian. Great powers are there, precious powers are there, but he is a careless guardian. And he harbors dangerous forces in his house. He is equally careless in guarding himself from those dangerous forces. And those dangerous forces break through and take possession of his house, as he describes elsewhere, say through anger, through passion, through violence, through evil thoughts. All these are projections of the dangerous forces in his house. The titan and the fury and the jinn, these are different types of evil beings, lie bound in the subconscious cavern pit, and the beast grovels in his ant den. The beast means unregenerate nature, lower nature, grovels, it struggles in sleep, it is indolent in his ant inside den pit. Dire mutterings rise and murmur in their drowse. These evil powers are asleep for most of the time. But in their drowse, they murmur, they mutter involuntarily, and they are very awful. Insurgent sometimes raises its huge head. At times this beast rebels and raises its huge head, a monstrous mystery lurking in life's deeps. The mystery of dark and fallen worlds, all these are in a condensed form in the human body. The dread visages of the adversary kings, asuras, rakshasas, their dreadful faces, appearances are projected. The dreadful powers held down within his depths become his masters or his ministers. These powers, normally held down by the waking consciousness, suddenly break through and become the masters of the house or become the ministers of this king. Enormous, they invade his bodily house, can act in his acts, infest his thought and life. That is, they can act in the acts of man, they can vitiate his thought and life. And when they do that, inferno, hell, fiery hell, surges into the human air and touches all with a perverting breath. Wherever that breath emanates, wherever that breath or sight falls, there is a perversion, a deformation. Grey forces, like a thin miasma creep, muddy water, like that, they flow everywhere, stealing through the chinks in his closed mansion's doors. Though the doors are closed, there are some chinks, chinks of unconsciousness. Through them they steal, discoloring the walls of upper mind in which he lives his fair and spacious life, man, and leave behind a stench of sin and death. Instead of the pure air of the upper mind, there is a stench, an offensive smell of sin and death. When these nether powers invade the surface being and take possession of the life of man and have a field time, not only rise in him perverse drifts of thought. It is not only in the form of thoughts, not only in the form of feelings that these lower forces make themselves felt. He says, not only rise in him perverse drifts of thought and formidable formless influences. We should not think that they are only formless impulses, impulsions. No, he says, but there come presences and awful shapes. They can take awful shapes. One can feel something cold, something eerie without seeing, or they can take awful shapes. Tremendous forms and faces mount dim steps and stare at times into his living rooms. They peep into the rooms where he is living. The master of the house, that is man, is living. Or called up for a moment's passionate work, at times it happens that man deliberately summons them. These evil, cruel forces or agencies to do something, to carry out his passion. He deliberately summons, and he fondly hopes that once the work is over, he will dismiss them. but they don't oblige. Says, oh, called up for a moment's passionate work, lay a dire custom's claim upon his heart. It forms a habit, and through that habit, they lay claim. We have a claim to stay and sit on your heart. They won't go. Aroused from sleep, they can be bound no more. Somehow, Providence, nature has arranged that they are all in the nether prisons, bound. But once man cooperates with them, releases them for something, summons them, then aroused from sleep, they can be bound no more. Man becomes a prisoner, afflicting the daylight and alarming night, invading at will his outer tenement house. The stark gloom's grisly, dire inhabitants, the fearful inhabitants of this gloom, mounting into God's light, all light perturb. All the light of God that is normally shining, it is upset, it is perturbed. All they have touched or seen, they make their own. They appropriate to themselves whatever they are allowed to see, whatever they touch. In nature's basement lodge, they stay, they come up from the nether regions, and in the basement of nature they make a dwelling. Mind's passages fill, disrupt thoughts, links and musing sequences. The rationale of thought, the ordered sequence of thought they disrupt. You begin to think incoherently. There is no connection between one thought and another. It is all a mischief of these fellows. Disrupt thoughts, links and musing sequences. Break through the soul's stillness with a noise and cry. Oh, they call the inhabitants of the abyss. They call the other fellows from the abyss. Invite the instincts to forbidden joys, the instincts which are kept under certain control by our ethics, by our morality, by our religions. They invite them, participate in the forbidden joys. A laughter wake of dread demonic mirth, and they laugh when they succeed in doing all this. When they succeed in causing havoc, when they succeed in calling the instincts of man to participate in the forbidden joys, a laughter wake of dread demonic mirth, that hilarity, that festivity is demonic. It is not human. And with nether riot and revel shake life's floor. They go on a riot. They enjoy themselves like drunkards. They revel. And the whole life's floor is shaken. When they get this slightest opportunity to come up, or they are called, man becomes a partner of them for his own reason, maybe to cause harm to others, whatever it is. And then, impotent to quell his terrible prisoner, the householder helpless sits above. The householder is unable to control them. He just sits helpless. Appalled, the householder helpless sits above. Taken from him, his house he sees no more. His house which has been taken from him never comes back to him. Then we say he is possessed. We say so and so is possessed because they have come and occupied the being with a certain cooperation at some stage from the original owner of the house. He is bound and forced, a victim of the play, or allured, joys in the mad and mighty din. Either he is bound and forced to act as a puppet, or he takes joy in their mighty and mad din. His nature's dangerous forces have arisen and hold at will a rebel's holiday. They have revolted, and it is a festive occasion for them to celebrate as a holiday. So there is no end to these things. I thought it would stop somewhere. We'll do it next time.